Hey, greetings everyone. It is GleeCon, and I am back again, bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thanks for tuning in. On our last episode, we continued our horde journey through Thousand Needles. We pretty much finished all the stuff that is not in the salt flats. We do have a test of lore to chase down. I don't know exactly how that's going to go or what that's going to look like, how hard it's going to be, but it seems neat. We'll be tagging in with the restoed shaman next time we play to probably do that and then head out to the salt flats as we continue that zone. We've also been reading War of the Scaleborn, and on the last chapter we started the second part of the book, where you see Virnoth beginning to have a friendship with Razageth, and just this incremental creeping closer on her part to the primals, while also kind of having a slight wedge driven between her and Alexstrasza. So stay a while and listen as we continue this journey with Chapter 5 of War of the Scaleborn. A season passed, then two. Before long, Alexstrasza realized she had not seen nor heard from Virnoth in a year's time. They used to make a habit of meeting for a hunt once a season, but Alexstrasza's duties had become even more demanding of late, and Virnoth had been less inclined to leave the comforts of her territories in the north. The realization came as a shock as Alexstrasza listened to a report from Egnion, the flight leader of Neltharion Shadow Scales, a fledgling military wing dedicated to gathering information on the enemy. As he reported that Virnoth had been spotted in the company of Razageth the Storm Eater, every eye in the seat turned to Alexstrasza, gauging her reaction. The news cut her heart to the quick, though she didn't let the emotion show in her face. Did Virnoth truly prefer the company of a creature as cruel and as unpredictable as Razageth, an incarnate? Alexstrasza knew Virnoth was lonely, and she knew her duties had oft made it impossible to visit her friend as much as she would have liked, but Razageth? How could Virnoth even entertain the idea of befriending an incarnate? Varrock had made threats against Alexstrasza's very life. Razageth was no better, hunting and killing ordered dragons for sport. Oh, I did get a correction. I watched a cutscene that at least had Varrock's voice. I mean name, so I do know I've been saying that one wrong. Have our hearts truly grown so far apart, Alexstrasza wondered, turning her gaze northwest as the other aspects prepared to take their leave. She walked to the edge of the seat, stepping out into the afternoon light, barely able to sense the strength of the sun on her scales. Was there anything Alexstrasza could do to keep her friend from following the incarnates down such a cruel, crooked path? What could she say that had not already been said? She sat, staring down at the bustling streets below. Everything she did was in service of the Dragonflights and, by extension, for the well-being of Azeroth. Over the last 2 centuries, Virnoth had seen what the Dragonflights had wrought. Was it not proof of the goodness of order magic? Why did Virnoth continue to believe that the Keepers meant their world harm? But more important, how could Virnoth choose the Incarnate's cruelty over the Dragonflight's hope, over their compassion? It made no sense. Talons clicked on the floor behind her.
Alexstrasza,
Neltharion asked.
may I have a word?
Of course, Alexstrasza said, turning as Neltharion joined her on the platform. Is something troubling you?
I could ask you the same question.
He took a seat beside her and stared out at the horizon.
I wanted to apologize for the Shadow Scales reports. I should have had them deliver the intelligence concerning Virnoth to you privately, rather than before an audience.
It's quite all right, Alexstrasza replied that the situation was anything but. Virnoth is one of the oldest and wisest primal dragons left in existence. Iridikron knows this as well as I do. No doubt he seeks to weaponize her against me, but I will not. Her words grew stiff and stuck in her throat. She swallowed down her emotion, then said, I will not allow that to happen.
To have Virnoth turn against us would be a grave loss,
Neltharion said.
No doubt Iridikron wishes to see her become an incarnate.
Alexstrasza shuddered. I cannot imagine she would choose such a path. But perhaps I no longer know her as I once did. I never would have imagined her befriending Razageth of all creatures.
We should discourage her from joining Iridikron if we can,
the Black Aspect said.
Do you think it possible to salvage your friendship with her?
I do hope so, Alexstrasza said, then let out a great sigh.
I will send an emissary to the Frozen Fangs today and invite her to hunt with me. I will also have the Shadow Scales monitor her movements more closely, Neltharion said, lifting his head. While an incarnate cannot hope to match the power of an aspect, we certainly do not need any more of them to contend with.
I wish I could find a way to reach her heart, Alexstrasza said, casting her gaze back to the horizon. It felt like a betrayal, but perhaps this was the way Viranoth had felt when Alexstrasza had become an aspect, like she could no longer understand one of her oldest and dearest friends.
You must, Neltharion said. Viranoth is seen as a paragon of wisdom in the Dragon Wilds. If she joins Eridikron's cause, especially as an incarnate, many will follow her example. We cannot risk that, especially now that Tyr's forces are scattered in the wake of the war with the Winterscorn.
I know, my old friend, Alexstrasza said. I will think of something, I promise.
In the meantime, Neltharion said, we should discuss the new tribe that has taken up residence in the Apex Canopy.
Alexstrasza cocked her head. It isn't another tribe of Jaredin, is it?
No, not this time, thankfully,
the black aspect replied. While the Kalashi and Zakali tribes had been in the Waking Shores for as long as Alexstrasza could remember, they had grown more aggressive in recent years.
This new species poses Alkine very few risks, for now, Neltharion said. They're smaller, softer, and short-lived. Nosdormu and I would like to try to contact them.
Nosdormu? Alexstrasza asked. What interest does he have in the business of the Waking Shores? Neltharion hesitated, then said,
Nosdormu believes their kind will flourish and spread throughout Azeroth by the millions. He says they will have a significant hand in shaping the fate of our world.
They are mortal, Alexstrasza replied, bemused. Sentient as they may be, how can such fragile creatures hope for so grand a legacy?
Though their lifespans are brief, they appear to be hardy and adaptable,
Neltharion replied.
I've watched their hunting parties work together to kill creatures 10 times their size. In large numbers they could be a threat, especially if Eridikron finds a way to turn them against us.
Be careful, old friend, she said with a chuckle. You're starting to jump at shadows. He huffed, giving her a sideways glance.
And yet here we are, concerned your dearest friend will join the Incarnates in their campaign against you.
Neltharion's words struck Alexstrasza like a bolt from above. She stepped back with a gasp, heart cracking, surprised by the violence of her reaction to the Earthwarder's words. Alexstrasza wasn't angry at him, no, but angry at her powerlessness to convince even her oldest friend of the goodness and nobility of her cause. She shook out her wings to rid herself of the first sparks of anger. You've always had a knack for cutting to the heart of the matter, haven't you?
I consider it a talent, he said with a chuckle.
She gave him a wry smile. No, you are right, as you so often are. Summon Nosdormu then, and let us make plans on how best to approach our newest neighbors. The mortals had built a small settlement in the Apex Canopy far in the south of the Waking Shores. A scattered assortment of primitive huts huddled along the waterways, hidden in the shadows of towering red bluffs and lush verdant canopies. Alexstrasza touched down on the eastern cliff of Genesis Falls, cloaked in one of Malagos's illusory spells. Never one to be left out, Malagos had insisted upon joining his fellow aspects, granting each one a limited measure of invisibility. Alexstrasza prevailed upon Ysera to join them as well, though the green aspect was keen to return to the dream. The Lifebinder peered down at the mortal settlement, charmed. These creatures walked on 2 legs, similar in size to Tarasek, but with lankier, more hunched frames. Instead of scales, they had inky blue flesh and bright, vibrant tufts of hair on their heads. They crouched around a fire, communicating in a guttural language and making gestures with 3-fingered hands. Whelps used rudimentary traps to fish along the waterways, while 4 or 5 adults worked together to descale a basilisk. Ysera cruised high overhead, no more than an emerald shimmer in the sky. Do you know from where they migrated? Alexstrasza asked as Neltharion landed on her right side. He too looked like nothing more than a shadow in the air. Malagos joined him a moment later, his expression bemused.
There are reports of similar creatures in the south, the Earthwarder replied. Those civilizations are reportedly larger and better established than the village you see.
Is this trolls, maybe? Fascinating, she said, watching a whelp catch a fish in a basket. With a joyful shriek, it leapt up from the riverbank to carry its prize back to its elders. I guess they were like the first main race. Ysera did a loop around the settlement, then landed at Alexstrasza's other side. "This is a very young race, but a peaceful one," she said, lifting her head and speaking directly to Neltharion. "If anything, I should like to issue an edict to forbid the flights from interfering with their development."
"Tell that to Nosdormu,"
Neltharion said with a snort.
"The mortals may not be peaceful for long."
The bronze aspect joined them, whipping up the dust as he lowered himself beside Ysera.
"In time, their civilizations will flourish. We should handle these first interactions with care, as they may have long-lasting implications for our flights."
Neltharion sat, considering the little village.
"We approach the Jaradin as we are, only to be met with deadly force. We should employ a different strategy with the mortals."
"Go on," she prompted.
"I've considered making contact through the Titan Forged,"
Neltharion replied.
"Even a Draconid would be less threatening than a fully grown dragon."
Nosdormu made a humming sound, thinking.
"That's assuming we can decipher their language and teach it to the Titan Forged in a reasonable amount of time."
"The Titan Forged weren't built for diplomacy,"
Malygos said with a chuckle.
"Look what happened with the Winterscorn. I suppose we could work with Tyr to design something more suitable for the cause, though I believe he's been rather busy with his own wars of late." "That is precisely the problem,"
Neltharion said.
"Could we send one of your arcane constructs to them,
Malygos, Alexstrasza asked, looking to the blue aspect.
Perhaps you could fashion one that resembles their kind."
"I suppose," the blue aspect replied, "but if Nosdormu speaks true, we may wish to find a more convenient way to fraternize with mortals. Something a bit more permanent."
The group fell silent for a moment, considering their options. Ysera cocked her head, watching two whelps playing on the riverbank.
"What better way to understand them than to become like them?"
Ysera said after a long moment.
"Even if only in their visage." "In their visage,"
Alexstrasza repeated under her breath. What a curious thought, and perhaps one that could only have originated from a mind that spent most of its time in the ever-shifting realms of the Emerald Dream.
"Malygos, would it be possible?"
"You would wish to abase yourself and become like a mortal, my queen?"
Malygos asked, lifting a brow. Excuse me. All these different voices.
"Come now, it isn't an abasement," Alexstrasza replied. "Ysera is right. A temporary adoption of a mortal form will allow us to empathize with and better understand their condition."
"Mortal forms might have their uses," Neltharion mused, "particularly if the mortal races are as prolific as Nosdormu claims. We'll want our intelligence agents monitoring their movements, and that will be easier if we can mimic their forms."
Malygos sighed.
"I suppose I can do some research. For now, let us test the limits of what illusory magic can do."
The aspects spent the remainder of the afternoon on the bluffs debating how to attempt a mortal form, or visage. Working together, they wove illusory magics with varying results. They first turned Neltharion into a towering mortal creature, one who stood taller than the keepers. Next, they managed to turn Alexstrasza into a smaller one, but her limbs were covered in crimson scales. Though Malygos projected annoyance, Alexstrasza thought his eyes glowed a little brighter with each failed attempt. As the sun began to set, splashing bright fire along the horizon, the blue aspect sat back on his haunches and rubbed his chin with his talons.
"Illusions are insufficient,"
he said, eyeing Ysera's now massive, illusory, mortal form. The green aspect's proportions weren't quite right. Her arms were far too long, dragging on the ground. The green aspect waved her ridiculous limbs around, sending Alexstrasza into a whelpish fit of giggles. Even Neltharion let out an amused snort. With a touch of sadness, the Lifebinder realized it had been years since she had laughed with so much abandon. Tyr had told her that her position required dignity, majesty, and 100 worries always weighed on her mind. Rare was the moment when she was able to be just Alexstrasza. Malygos rubbed his chin with his knuckles, thinking aloud.
"This will need to be something different, I think. For this to work with the desired effect, the magic will need to be deeply personal, individual."
Before the blue aspect could finish, a chorus of shrieks echoed through the skies. Alexstrasza turned her gaze up, Panic spread through the Aspect's attendants fast as wildfire. Her smile faded as she watched her major domo, Sarah Strauss, dive for the butt. He landed eagerly before the lifebinder, dipping his head to her. Fear roiled off his body like summer heat.
My queen, we received word from Valdraken.
What? Neltharion said, charging forward toward them as Ysera reverted back to her draconic form.
What has happened? It's Tyr,
Sarah Strauss said.
He's fallen.
Fallen? Alexstrasza's eyes widened. She recoiled, her heart clattering through her chest. She looked to Ysera, who stood stunned and blinking tears away.
No, it cannot be. He can't be dead. How? It matters not at the moment,
Neltharion replied as the other aspects joined them, the heartbreak clear on their faces.
We cannot let this information become common knowledge.
Tyr was our greatest benefactor,
Ysera said, and the grief in her voice was as deep as the dream itself.
He helped to make us who and what we are. If this news is true, I do not wish to erase his memory. We should celebrate his many contributions and honor his life.
I agree, Neltharion said, turning back to Alexstrasza, but Iridikron must not learn of this development. Our alliance with Tyr and the other keepers was a great source of strength for the Broodlands. The recent wars have decimated the Titan Forge, and if Tyr is gone...
Alexstrasza closed her eyes and bowed her head.
Then Iridikron will have reason to strike,
she said, drawing in a deep breath.
Very well. Let us return to Valdraken at once.
All right, so we have nothing major other than that last beat right there happening. Again, we have them learning that Viranoth is continuing to get closer to the primal side. So we, again, incrementally inch closer to that. We have the beginning of seeing the mortal races. I suspect maybe they're trolls. We also have the first inklings, because you know the dragons have to become comfortable shifting to and from a humanoid form. So we have the beginnings of that, and now we have Tyr, who we know falls based on the Tyr storyline. We have that happening as well. Also, we know already from Chronicles where and when it happens. It happens over in the Tyr's Hand area, I think. It doesn't happen here in the Dragonlands. It happens based on his wars with the mortals and everything going on in the Eastern Kingdoms or wherever. All right, we have another episode of the Pipe 5x5. Hey, everyone, thank you so much, as always, for watching and for listening. I appreciate you all. You rock. And I'll see you next time on Lore of Warcraft.